Hello, can you guys hear us? Nobody on here, that's why nobody hears this. Rebecca, can you hear us okay?
Gas mileage. Gas mileage on there. Everybody else charges up. There's always high. The garbage is cold.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Usually jumps up, you know, $2 here and there.
I'm pretty proud of ours.
Somehow reacts with an and it
Okay, you wanna kick us off?
fruit or something like that. He's ran all. She heard it. But they want.
Okay, you wanna kick us off?
Oh, okay, all right, we'll go ahead and get started here. Hopefully the weather will hold for us, so I'll get home in one piece. I don't know about your girls, but my girls have been flying. And they've been going through the food pretty hard, within that. We have a Bees and Brews will be on the 10th, 11th, 13th. Okay, the Bees and Brews, second
13th.
Wednesday of the month, 13th. It'll be at Haynes on Main in Mackinac. Steve McNair is going to be talking next month on the Master Beekeeping Program. And so we've got there. Everybody else, Tom's here if you want to order your bees, if you need them. We're here, and again, we can mentor you within it. If the weather keeps on going up, we'll be doing a lot of hive inspections at the club hives. So far, I've got 6 out of 6 left still, so I feel pretty good about them so far. What else has everybody got? We good? Okay. Tom, I'm gonna send it to you then, unless you got something else you want me to say. Okay. Oh, we had a class. We had 43 people in it. We had 43 people take the class. I've got a class going with 3 now. So we have.
Oops, hang on, sorry.
Need a black light.
All right, I remember these days. So we got a good crew. And you want to so we had
All right, now we're good, go ahead.
okay, so we had, 43, we had 3 people repeat the class. Again, we really encourage you to repeat the class because quite often it is hard to take all that information in from a class and go with it. So we did have a very nice group within that. So we got new beekeepers. So if you've got somebody that's in your area, please be willing to mentor them. And again, sometimes when you have to explain it to somebody else, it makes you have to think it through a little bit more. And so then that will actually help you when you mentor other people. So please be willing to be a mentor, even if you're only a year or 2 in. If when you mentor, that will help you as far as your activities. All right.
Hardware workshops?
Hardware workshop. Oh yeah, we did. By the way, I'm gonna bring out those nukes to you. We had probably about 20-25 people there. We made, let's see, 6 times 4, 24 nukes, 3 times 3, 9 swarm traps. We did a couple hive autopsies. Basically, there were 2 that starved. One had starved last fall, and one starved fairly recently. It was because it was a small one. So yeah, so we had quite a bit of activity for our workshop. We put together frames. So I think they learned a lot just seeing that, putting together a nuke box of swarm traps. So I think there's a lot more people are putting up those swarm traps because your bees will swarm. might as well try and get them if you can. So, and those kind of placements were there. What else am I forgetting?
I think that's it.
Okay, in that case, I'll go for you.
All right, can you guys hear me online? Hopefully it sounds okay. We'll take that. All right, so my name is Tom Pancona, and I'm here to talk about Queener. Before I start, I see some faces that are maybe new. Anybody here for the first time? Tell us about yourselves. How'd you find us? Yeah, either.
Sucker.
I said part. What was that, maybe 3-4 weeks?
Yeah, I do an intro because some people think, oh yeah, I want to get into beekeeping, not realizing beekeeping takes a lot more work, and they're actually more likely wanting to go into native bees versus honeybees. So I kind of do a sorting class, and then he suckered into it a lot.
So I'm in the second set of classes right now, and we have our second course this Thursday. We'll do it for the next 3 Thursdays.
You gonna start some hives?
Absolutely.
Nice.
So yeah,
Where are you at? Which area?
moving to normal, I'll live in the Fullerton area, but I also acreage in normal.
Right on, that's cool. Nice.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
His interest is a little different. He wants to go into kind of a food service-ish. How would I just, food manufacturing is where he wants to go and stuff, so.
Go on.
So,
Oh, that's awesome.
so.
Did you find, there's a big grant out. Actually, my senator sent me a thing, probably sent it to a lot of you, to apply for it. Yeah, that's true. Numbers. How about you?
I'm Paul. I also took the intro class. So, I didn't get back into the other classes, because I had some conflicts. So, but I just want to come see how this, how the club looks.
Yeah.
So I don't have any hives. I live here in town, and
Yeah.
I decided if they want to try and do a hive in town, so. Between the size of my yard and my neighbors having a pool, I just want to be careful about it.
Yeah. And again, we have the club hives. I have extra suits. You can come out and say, yeah, this is for me, or it's kind of like, I don't want anything to do with them, and just get a feel for it. So, cool, good. Sorry I didn't recognize you.
Correct.
Come on, all right. Okay, Mark, your turn.
I ain't my first time. I've been here 3-4 times.
Yeah, he's the big father guy.
He's one of our imports from the west, over in Creve Coeur, so, cool.
Yeah, for sure. Well, welcome. I didn't catch where are you at in town? In Bloomington? No?
Yeah, I'm over by the airport, so.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, how many of you live in town and have hives? I know one for sure. 2, yeah, there you go. So good people to talk to about their experiences with it. They love the swimming pools,
Yeah.
especially if they're salt. So that is a trick. So I don't know, it's a sticky wicket as to whether you go talk to the neighbors first or talk to the neighbors afterwards. But
Yeah, and we have a pool in our yard, but they don't seem to go there first. They'll find other resources.
Is yours just all water?
No, it's not.
So yours is flowing.
It's, yeah,
Okay.
but we really don't see many bees around the pool. And we have like a little fish pond we're out in the country and we get a lot of corn stalk and whatnot. And it didn't get cleaned last summer. They loved that, like dirty water.
oh,
So yeah. So, I mean, they gathered there and drank quite a bit,
Because the
actually.
stalks are on the water and so it doesn't piss the rain.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
there's a lot of reasons. Like they like the mineral for sure. Like dirty puddles and stuff like that. You'll see them in there for sure.
My bird bath, they've been hanging in my bird bath
Yeah.
quite a bit right now. So.
So I have hives actually. I'm in the township area. And I have a bunch across the street from a fancy subdivision. And they get a little wore out about the bees there and come over and complain about them being on they're swarming in their yards and they're on their bird feeders, the hummingbird feeders, and then they're in the pool. And every time I go over there and look, there's like 3 or 4 on the edge of the pool. And there are a bunch on the bird feeders, so actually I need to buy some hummingbird feeders and hand them out to the neighbors there. Cause all you gotta do is get the bee-proof ones they have a longer gap on them, so their tongues can't get to the syrup, and then The bees won't go to the
That's it.
hummingbird feeders.
My bees don't bother the hummingbird feeders at all, really. Now, the bird feeder is going after the dust and the pollen on it.
It
It's all
just depends.
seasonal, but
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
You know, on the
Bird
bird
feeders,
feeders
yeah.
for the corn and that, but in the summer. When we've got the solar cover on, if the water gets up on the top, like if it's raining or something, I'll see them there some, not tons. And late in the season is when they go after the hummingbird feeders, if
When they're hungry.
kind of the dirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, then they hot tub too.
but okay, so think about the chemical difference of the hot tubs.
Actually, my hot tub's got 40 in it too, so it's, I got, it just.
It's dirt off you that they're like it, it's wet and rolls off you.
I mean, you like hot dog, they like hot dog.
So.
Cool,
Nice.
all right, okay.
All right, so we'll talk a little bit about queenering, just to kind of get an idea of maybe the goals of people here, what they want to learn, just to make sure that I cover the bases. I'm assuming most of you have a desire to raise maybe a dozen or two queens, maybe, or just kind of learn about the process a little bit, maybe less than a dozen, somewhere in that neighborhood. Is there anybody that wants to shoot for like queen production? Like to start producing like a couple hundred?
I'm thinking about it.
Good for you, that's awesome. By all means, there's plenty of room for you.
Yeah, cause you're in the Rantoul area, so you've got.
Yeah, she's
I
got
have
her-
her in Camargo. Oh, be that way.
So in an hour and a half or so, I can't cover anywhere near the information you need to know about queening, but I'm gonna try and touch on some of the basics and talk about some ways that you can definitely raise some queens this year and be successful with it, and kind of talk through some problems and some ideas and some of the things that we do and some of the things I've done in the past, and we'll kind of go from there. So I'll start off with like, why would you want to raise some queens? And I know some of you are like brand new to it and you're like, wow, I'm nowhere near ready for that. You might be surprised. And then sometimes you need to know how to deal with the situation when you have some queen cells. I think we have another one where we'll talk about swarming and dealing with, when you see swarm cells, how to make splits and do some of that coming up. So that'll be pretty helpful there. So I think one of the big things is, especially this time of year, while everybody's all fired up, especially with the nice weather. Everybody's fired up about bees for the year because they haven't started sweating, you haven't gotten stung a whole bunch of times yet. Everybody's ready to see their bees again, and it's a great time to sit down and say, what are your goals this year? And kind of write out maybe at least three, if you can, the three things that you want to tackle this year. Maybe even four, maybe a stretch on top of there. So I highly recommend it, and I think one of them should be to make a split for sure. Maybe do the on the spot queening method that I'm gonna tell you about. Stop buying bees for me. I think everybody thinks I'm joking about that. My goal is for you not to buy bees for me. I want you to figure out how to keep your bees alive over the winter and how to make enough splits to not have to buy bees every year and for me to take checks from you for this. Although I do appreciate it, but I want you to become sustainable in your beekeeping practices and learn how to take these things into your own hands, because you'll have better bees when you do this. You'll definitely pay more attention to your bees. I think one of the big things here is like learning skills and improving your skills as a beekeeper. By no means do you have to be an expert to raise a couple of queens. I think anybody can do it, and I encourage you to try it. My favorite one here is a source of frustration and yet really rewarding. I will cuss and throw things and go on rampages and invent bad words with my bees and definitely with queens for sure. Because you could do everything right and it doesn't work out. And then sometimes you make mistakes and they work perfectly, and it's everywhere in between. And that's beekeeping in general, I think. So when it does work out, it's pretty cool. And it's one of those moments where when you see that bar of beautiful queens on there, or you see that first one that emerges on a frame, or even better yet, when you see eggs from a brand new queen that you raised and that you took actions to do that, it's pretty awesome. It's definitely a moment to pat yourself on the back about it. And I think the last item here, even if you want to be a large scale producer, you got to do it for the love of the bees. Like if you're not into bees, this is the wrong hobby. There's way more things to spend your time on, and stuff like that, but if you love the bees, I'm not sure there's a better hobby to get into, because it's really pretty neat. All right, so goals, queen rearing goals, it sounded like a lot of you were in that 1 to 6, maybe a dozens of queens, some of you do want to explore, maybe doing more than that. There's different methods based on how many you want to produce. So, not to say that you couldn't raise hundreds of queens doing on the spot queen rearing, but you have to have hundreds of hives to create that. And I would argue, even if you want to do like 500 plus queens a year, 300 plus queens a year, you probably need 50 plus hives to do that, to be able to have the resources for that. Just my opinion. Could you do it with less? Absolutely. So some of the skills that you need, the first one might seem obvious, but you need this for more than just the reason of harvesting her and picking her up and putting her in a cage to put her in another hive. You need to do it to even start this whole process. Is you got to be able to find the queen. So you really got to get good at it. I welcome anybody that wants to come play with bees with me, especially when we have nukes going, and we have a lot of nukes in the spring. Come work bees with me. Once I know that you're proficient at moving the frames in and out, and you're not going to roll queens as easy, I'll give you a whole block of them, and you can go through and try and find queens. And there's no harm if you don't. But once you start finding a queen, it starts to get easier, and you'll start learning some tricks. And come work bees with someone else. So the best part about coming to a bee club like this is to have a community. So go shake hands with people and say, hey, I want to come play bees with you. I want to learn some things, and do that with a bunch of people. Go work with everybody around the room, because you're going to learn something you love and something you're not real crazy about from everyone that you go work bees with. It's also a great opportunity to learn different kinds of hardware and different races of bees and things like that. Just why people like things, and everybody has different teaching methods and different reasons why they get into bees and all that stuff. And it's really a lot of fun to do that. So you'll get a lot out of going to work bees with somebody else. Mac over here, he runs a program up in Flanagan. He's always looking for help. So if anybody wants to give him a hand, what do you got? 11 hives up there, 13 hives, something like that. So he's a kind of a one-man show. So he's got the boys there to help him out, and some people that come there now and then to do it, but he's the guy doing it day in and day out. Plus, he's crazy enough to have bees on his own too. So he definitely can use a hand, especially if you're retired and can go up there during the day and give him a hand. He'd appreciate it. So once you know how to spot your queen, and probably maybe before that, you should be able to identify eggs, larvae, and brood. And I know this sounds really dumb, but you'd be surprised how many people can't identify eggs and can't identify larvae and can't identify brood, or the differences between eggs and larvae. So definitely spend some time with that. And really, you can comb the internets and the YouTubes and all that stuff and watch videos till your heart's content. The way you learn is looking through hives. And the way you learn is seeing it on different comb, in different conditions and stuff like that. And so just practice. One of the biggest things I can tell you to be more successful with this, especially for new beekeepers, but I think for everyone, I don't buy anything but black foundation, because it makes the eggs glow. It really makes your inspection time way quicker to go through your bees. And the bees don't really care if it's yellow or black or white or anything like that. If you try, you must have blood for punishment to go to white, because you're gonna have a real hard time seeing a white egg on white foundation on the background. I know everybody says, well, I got them from my honey supers, and the queen's not supposed to lay in your honey supers. I guarantee you will have a queen lay in a honey super sometime in your beekeeping career. Joe, how many years you been running bees? Too many.
Yes, and yeah, it'll happen.
40 something, 50 something years, right? He's
Yeah.
been working bees, and
Right.
you're gonna have it.
Yeah, kind of like you sleep in your bedroom, but sometimes you sleep on the couch.
Excluders or not, sometimes they'll get through excluders, and there's all kinds of reasons why she might get up there, and you're gonna have a real hard time finding her. So I recommend, especially if you're buying stuff now, buy the black foundation. It'll make a big difference in your inspections. The other thing I would say is, ideally, you wanna go through your bees when it's sunny out, get that sun at your back, and kind of move that frame around wherever you gotta move it to be able to see. Maybe a pair of cheater glasses, or Harbor Freight has some flip downs, kind of like the old baseball glasses where they come down like that. You can get them with magnifiers too. So do whatever you need to do to be able to see eggs and get comfortable with it. And after a while, it'll become a lot easier, I promise. Sometimes you just won't see them. There's times I miss queens all the time, and I miss eggs sometimes, and it just depends. And then other times I see them, nobody else can see them, and I have to prove it with a picture like this. So sometimes that's a good idea too, is just take a picture of that frame and then zoom in, and it might be helpful for you. I think the Shiver Deckers, he has some sight issues, and he used to run a GoPro on him, and he used to take pictures all the times of the frames, and then he would go inside and look at it on the computer to be able to see inside those cells really good. So there's a lot of good tricks there. You can get the chesty mount for a GoPro, buy a cheap generic GoPro for $100. That's a good way to do it. You can go back through what you saw. Just some ideas. So you really got to understand the life cycle of a bee, and I should have put a slide in here on that one, because that's pretty important. But you got to understand that they're eggs for 3 days, their larvae, until day 9, and then from there they're brood, right? So you got to know 3, 6, whatever, 15, depending on which kind of bee they are. So different times for queens, different times for workers, different times for drones. You've got to remember this. Like that's whatever way works for you. There's some good posters and pictures and stuff like that. But you've got to understand this, and your beekeeping will improve once you have this mastered and memorized, because when you look at things, you'll be able to know something happened this many days ago, or something's going to happen in this many days. So it's I kind of joke about it as it's like a long fuse or a short fuse as to when something's going to happen when it goes boom. So like if you have a dark frame of brood, it's going to go boom pretty quick. And if you have eggs and larvae, it's going to go boom in 2 weeks, right? So it's just kind of getting comfortable with those durations and understanding. But with queen rearing, it's essential to know the right age of those larvae to graft. And then there's a little bit of forgiveness on it, but you'll have better quality queens when you graft the right size larvae, or whatever, do other methods. Critical thinking, if you're gonna have a hard time with beekeeping if you don't have critical thinking. And I'll just throw that out there. I see some smiles as I look around the room, but it'll humble you for sure. You should always be asking. I like PK always says this. She says you should always be asking why, to yourself and to other people when you go work bees. I talk to myself all the time when I go through my bees. Call it whatever you like, but I always ask myself, like, why is this doing this? What's going on? And just trying to think it through and trying to figure out how I'm going to solve a problem. So do that yourself, and take lots of pictures and ask questions on like our Facebook page or other Facebook pages. You'll get help from other people. Have some tough skin, because there'll be some people that aren't super friendly, but that's life. You just sort through. And you got to work hard. So beekeeping is definitely not an easy hobby. It'll definitely stress you, no doubt about it. But keep after it is pretty rewarding. So one of my favorite methods, and I started teaching this when I do queen rearing classes in the field, is on the spot queen rearing. And this is, I think, the Miller method was the original way they would call this. Like if you read the ABC of beekeeping, some of those older publications from Data and stuff like that, you'll hear about the Miller method. This isn't something new, but it's gained a lot of popularity probably in the last 10 years from a guy named Mel Dickelkopson. And actually he spoke at the ISBA meeting in November down in Springfield. And I'm sorry that I missed it, but it's definitely a horrible weekend for the bee conference. There's a lot going on that week. But Mel's got a page out there. You can look it up. It's mdasplitter.com, or just Google on the spot queen rearing and you'll find it. Great guy. He's an old guy. He's a barber, and he has a really good way of teaching. I think pretty mild mannered. Lots of YouTubes of him. Check it out for sure. So the gist of this is you take a strong hive in good conditions and make more hives out of it. So how many you do is up to you, based on your goals of what you wanna work out from it. You could make one split from it, you could make maybe 6 splits from it. It just depends how big, that hive is and your conditions or other hives that you have to pull resources from. It's up to you how you wanna do it. But really the important thing is it's gotta be strong, and this is anytime with queen rearing, and pretty much anytime with beekeeping, you always wanna have strong, healthy, and good characteristics of your bees. And if you don't have that, those are not the ones you should be crossing. Right, so if they're sick, that's not the ones you wanna split. If they're not healthy or they're cranky, like Michael Palmer says, they staple your socks to your ankles. Those are not the genetics that you wanna copy, because a lot of times that does come with the new queens. So make sure you're choosing wisely the colony that you take from. Highly recommend this. Is gonna be a lot easier on honey flow. Does it have to be on honey flow? No. We'll have far more success on honey flow. He likes to push this, his magic time, he's in Michigan. And he says the best time for him is Mother's Day, is about when he's gonna do this. I think you can do it probably all the way through up into July before the dirt hits. It just depends what your conditions are and what your hives give you to work with. But, so you gotta find the frame with the queen. And I like to take that frame, and I'll pull it off and I'll put it in a nuke. And I'll make a split with it. So I'll take her and then 2 more frames of bees. So usually a dark frame of brood, light frame of brood, and a frame of eggs and larvae, and the queen's on one of those. And I put that in a nuke, with a frame sandwich, so 2 new frames in there, or you could use Droncomb, it's up to you. I usually use, new foundation, because I want them to pull it, I want them to draw. So I'll put that nuke off to the side and let her go. So I keep her. Then in the hive that I just took her from, I'm gonna go find a frame with eggs or really young larvae. But if you're not good at spotting this, just find eggs. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your hive tool and you're gonna carefully smash the bottoms of some cells. Like you can smash the whole line of the width of your hive tool in a couple of spots on that frame. And then they will draw those out in the queen cell with no queen in there. They will do it. And you could do this on 1 frame, you could do this on 4 frames, whatever your jam is, it's up to you. Again, it depends on your situation and what you want to make out of it, how far you want to tear that hive down.
When you say the bottom,
Yep, the bottom of this, I'm gonna show a picture, but it's, so the bottom of the hexagon, right? So just the very bottom of it.
at the bottom of the frame, that's what you're referring.
No, the bottom of the cell. So the bottom, you're gonna see in the picture here in a second. Here, I'll flip the picture. There you go. So you can kind of see right here. So it's the very bottom of that cell.
Oriented with the bottom of the frame.
Yeah, yes, all right, no, I'm sorry, I wasn't catching that's what you were trying to say. So yeah, it's, yes, the bottoms of the cells in the bottom of the frame, but you could do it anywhere in the frame, like you can see in this picture. You know, some down at the bottom, some in the middle, some at the top, whatever. I usually, when I do it, I'll usually at least smash 2 spots. But you could do 3, I don't like to gamble. So I usually like to have more than I need, but that's all you gotta do. Put those back in the hive and walk away.
But you did like 10 cells in a row.
Whatever the width of your hive tool is.
Right.
So, I mean, you could do more, you could do less, right? So you could take like a knife and just catch the bottom of 1 cell if you want, whatever way, like just keep it easy and just use the bottom of your hive tool, whatever the width that is, it'll be just fine.
So you're trying to kill the egg?
No. No, matter of fact, I'm not. So you'll see that in the picture of the eggs are in there. You can see them clearly.
Changing the shape of the cell.
You wanna just clip the bottom of the cell. It's just so that they'll pull those into queen cells. Now here's the secret. Even if you don't mash that with your hive tool, they're gonna make queen cells all over. But use that hive tool and you're encouraging them to use the right spot. They don't always listen, but you'll see a lot more success there. A lot of times if you make those spots, that's where they'll draw those queen cells and you won't see them all over the other frames that you'll have to damage. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. and you're gonna notch the cells with eggs, or very, very young larvae. And I got some pictures of larvae here. I have way more slides with pictures than I do with words, I promise. So the next thing I do is a couple days later, I very carefully check that frame that I notched. So what I usually do is, I always have a Sharpie in my bee jacket. Sometimes I lose it or forget it, and I'll use my hive tool, but I'll mark that frame that I notched, so I know the frame to go back to quickly and easy. So I'll take my hive tool and space it out so I have room. So I'll kind of wedge the frames apart, so I got room to pull that out, and I'm not gonna damage queen cells when I lift it up. I'm gonna very carefully lift that up, because they're very fragile. And technically, you shouldn't be moving queen cells until day 10. So you'll hear me say like day 10, day 5, day 3, whatever, that's from the day it was laid. So when I say 10 days, that's 10 days from when that egg was laid. So
You're notching, the eggs are already in there, then you might be behind a little bit.
I might be behind, or I might be a little ahead,
Or, I mean, yeah, you've already got a couple days into the egg being there.
usually.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes it might be brand new.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't matter. So the thing is like whenever you check, like if they're brand new later, like you literally saw the queen march over and lay an egg, you might want to check in 4 days, to see if they started to pull them out, right? Or if you use young larvae, you can check probably the next day and see them pull out into cells. Oh, no. I forgot your wax.
It's all right.
I'm sorry, Izzy.
All right.
I promise I'll bring it tomorrow. I gotta drop one out. So you're gonna check to see that they've drawn them. And this is more for curiosity's sake than anything. They're gonna draw, but it's always nice to know for sure. And I like to know how many they pulled, so that I know how many splits I'm gonna have to make and start figuring that out too. So I can look through other hives and figure out what resources I wanna steal, those kinds of things. I can do some planning. So then, once you set that back down in there, a week later, so like if you notch on Saturday, the next Saturday, you can then make your splits. Cause that'll mean that the queen is at least 10 days old. So after 10 days, you can move those frames around and not worry about damaging those queens. So before that, you really don't want to move around queen cells until day 10 or later, because they're extremely fragile. I'll probably say that like another 4 times. So once you make your splits, you can make your splits any way you want. You can put them in nukes, you can put them in queen castles, you can put them in whatever, 10 frame highs, 8 frame highs, mediums, deeps, it doesn't matter, right? As long as you can fit the frame in there, make your splits the way you have harbored. But you want to feed those splits, and then I start checking about 2 weeks later to start looking for eggs. Now, here's the jam. Are you gonna always see eggs in 2 weeks? Absolutely not. Sometimes you'll see it in 5 weeks. Sometimes you'll see it in 3 days. It just depends. Always depends, right? So here, I'll try and show it here, like, not touching the screen, but getting close to the screen.
You're looking for, okay, I think making sure you're looking for eggs, and you're assuming this is the new queen, correct?
New
From the old queen?
This is the old queen. There's no queen in this hive. So there better not be more eggs. I guess that's the other thing. Because you might have Joe's situation, he just posted on Facebook a frame with 2 queens on it. That happens. It happens more than you think. Yeah, Michael Palmer says like 30% of his hives have 2 queens a lot of times. It's very common. So like right here, again, this is why you don't use yellow foundation, because it's really hard to see those eggs. Like I'm not even really seeing them, to be honest with you. But it's just the very bottom of the frame. How is that making? Very bottom of that cell is what's being clipped right there. So these don't care, so don't stress out. And this is Mel's book here. It's pretty pricey, and it's worth every penny. So I donated a copy of this to our library from the club, so you can go get the first edition from there for free. I think he charges $70 or $75 for that book. But you're like, holy moly, that's a lot of money. I can go learn from the internet, but that $75, you could sell that new for $200 all day long.
Okay, so if you're inviting queen cells to be on those horizontal you know, like, what is it, 7 cells or whatever. There's not enough, so like,
So cells are gonna go
ideally,
this way.
yeah, so ideally, you'd have like not every cell, like, there's just not enough width. Like, cause a queen cell's wider than a cell, right?
Yeah, they won't all be great. Like they,
Right, okay.
usually like they'll draw like that one and then that one and then that one and that one. Sometimes they're merged together.
Okay,
Bees do what bees want to do,
okay. That's what I was wondering.
contrary to what you want sometimes, but it's okay. Like, you'll be fine.
You said you made your splits based on the number of queen cells and anticipating how many queen cells you have.
It's a frames with cells. I should have said it that way. You could get pretty good with a razor and maybe carve out a cell out of there, but you're probably gonna damage it.
That's what I was wondering, so.
You
say
can make a
all
cage.
Say all 4 of those scores had, you had 12 queens. What would you do then?
So here's the thing, there's a lot of people, like I was looking around for pictures, like normally I don't steal pictures for presentations, but I stole almost every single picture in this presentation, except for the ones at the end. So these are other people's, and I was looking at somebody's page and they said that they always call all but 3 cells. But do you be you, right, as they say.
So then you put all 3 of them into one.
Yeah, so if there's a cell,
Leave them in there.
like a cell here, a cell here, and a cell here, maybe. Is probably what you would
And then
teach.
the best
Smash
queen
the others.
lives.
Correct. They duke it out. They'll work out the situation. It's kind of like if you have chickens, right? So everybody thinks chickens are cute and cuddly and want hugs and stuff like that. They're vicious monsters. They would eat you. They would eat you in a minute. It's, thank God they're this tall, because they would rule the world for sure. Very slowly and not very wisely, but they would do it. The queens will work it out. Like it, I promise you. So I don't really worry about calling in that situation. I'd rather have more than less, just in case something doesn't work out. You know, one will be all right.
So Tom, do you feed the bees when they're starting to raise queen cells like that or not?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Joel. So the big hive that I'm doing this, it kind of depends on the situation. Right? If I'm doing this Mother's Day, chances are things are hammered down, right? So they're bringing in a ton of nectar and stuff like that. I probably wouldn't feed them because a lot of times they might be plugging up the other frames. And then I got frames full of honey. I don't think there's any harm in feeding, but chances are you probably got supers on this hive and it's a big monster. That's the one you should be doing this in. You want tons of bees. You want it boiling with bees. Anytime you're making queens, boiling with bees. And I'll show you some pictures of like what I look for or what I want my builders to look like when I'm doing it. So when I make my splits, I always feed. Always. It doesn't matter if there's a nectar flow or not, because the way I make them, I use a dark frame of brood, a light frame of brood, and a frame of eggs and larvae. I don't know if there's many foragers. So I always want them to be able to get the food. And like on my nukes, I like to use mason jar feeders, but you'll see some pictures like I use frame feeders. I use whatever I got. So there's another system here. This is a non-grafting method. It's the NICOT or Genter system. Basically what this is you buy these things, you pick up the queen, you put her in there, and then you close it up. And the queen can be tended by the bees, but she can't get out. So she's trapped in this little space and lays up the little cups inside of there. That's the idea behind it anyways. Sometimes you're successful, sometimes you're not. So this is a good method if you're afraid of grafting. You can try this.
Are you afraid of what?
What's that?
If you're afraid of what?
Grafting. We're gonna talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
So it's coming. That's the one everybody's afraid of. And some good reason, but a lot of it's just fear. Like you just gotta do it and try it and keep trying it. You'll figure it out for sure. But anyways, so the NICOT system, I got some pictures of it in a minute. The idea is you have a small area with cups inside of it. The queen then will lay up the cups with eggs, and then you can then take those cups and put them on a bar and let them turn them into queen cells. So the idea here, you release the queen back into the hive. I will say this, I have never done this. I bought some systems when John first started, Hillco bees, I had them order me a couple of these, actually, I think I had them order me like 2 dozen of these and I gave them out at a queen rearing workshop. And I never tried it. So I'm not necessarily telling you it's a good idea or a bad idea. I personally don't like the cups that they use for it because I'm set up for a different system. But you can make it work, right? There's pros and cons to every single system. And I think you can buy the Epcot system now for like $40, something like that. I forget what I saw it on Manlink when I stole the picture. But, and I think John sells them too, as a matter of fact now. But, so similar situation, you're gonna put those cells in there, let them draw them into full cells capped. So after 10 days old, so again, 10 days after the egg was laid, is when you can start putting them in splits. I would tell you sooner than later, because you may be off, especially if you're new at this. You may not be really good at figuring out what 4-day-old larva looks like. Maybe you are. I screw it up all the time. So I would say always I err towards younger than older on that when I'm making those splits. So again, you check for eggs in 2 weeks. So this is kind of what one of the systems looks like. This is the Genter, whatever it's called. Yeah, Genter. This is a Genter system here on the left. And then inside of these are little cups. And those cups go into these little holders. And this is called like a hair roller cage that holds that queen so she can emerge. And then the bees can tend to her inside of that frame. So this is a nice way to do it. Now, the question you might be asking is you're like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with all these extra queens? Because I don't necessarily need 150 queens or 120 queens. So that's a good question. I don't know the answer. I don't know if you can just clean them out and reuse it. Probably. We reuse our JZBZ cups that I'll show you in a minute. So you could probably do it. So
How
this,
long can you keep a queen before she needs to be in a hive?
it depends on a lot. Let me come to that at the end with questions, if that's okay. So this is the NICOT system. Looks pretty similar, right? So this is the plug that you can put the queen in, release her. There's like a top that goes over this that isn't here, so that the bees can actually tend to her while she works in here. And sometimes it takes her a while to lay this up, and sometimes the next day to lay it up. And these are the cups that go into these little holes right here. So I suppose you could just put in a couple that you need, and then I don't know. I guess you would lay up the other thing and whatever, they would dry up and fall out. I don't know. But these are the holders for the cups. And this is a piece that snaps into. You can kind of see what it looks like on this frame. So they're attached into something like this is what we use. By some grace of God, I had a brand new one because all my others burned. This is what it would look like. Here is you would have this different system. This is set up for another style I'm going to talk about with JZBZ cups when you're grafting, but it could look just like this, where those cups would hang down here. So she would emerge, and the bees could tend her and take care of her. Here's kind of what it looks like on a frame. They just kind of snapped in a medium here. No harm there. Yeah, so they're popping these out, putting them into the cups they're gonna put into a frame like that. Then they put those into a strong hive without a queen to draw them out. We're gonna talk about that in a minute. So then the last method that I'll talk about here is grafting. So this is one that makes a lot of people nervous, and I forgot the pack of grafting tools that I have, but you're gonna see a picture of them here in a minute. And I think we're gonna try and do a queen rearing class. I gotta talk to Mac and figure out some dates. We've been trying for the last couple of years, but just everything's gotta line up. But when we do the class, you'll have a grafting tool, some cups and a frame and all that stuff. So we'll get you hooked up. So grafting, basically the idea here is you're picking up that larva, that young larva, putting them in cups, and then putting those cups in a hive with no queen, and I'll turn them into queens, I swear. So the steps to this is you gotta create a builder, which we're gonna talk about in a minute, which is basically a really strong hive with no queen. And then you're gonna, I like to do it 3 to 5 days later, just to make sure that there's no queen in there. Is when I'll put my grafts in there. So I'll go through that whole builder just to make sure there's no eggs in there, that there wasn't a queen I missed. Like for us, it's very common that a virgin queen will fly into it, and ruin everything. But, I like to go in and make sure there's no eggs before I put the grafts in there and waste my time. So you're gonna graft into these cups. I'm gonna show you some pictures of that in a minute. And then again, the same thing. After 10 days, you can take those and move them into splits of whatever you're liking. So like maybe you bought some packages and you want to replace those package queens. They're not the best that you want. Or maybe some of them are rock stars and some of them are junk. You can replace the ones that are junk and keep the rock stars, whatever you like. So there's a lot of ways to use those queen cells. Give them to your friends, sell them, whatever. So again, 2 days later, you're going to check for eggs. So what's a builder? So a builder is a very strong hive. So I have this in capitals because these are very important pieces. So it's gotta be strong and it's gotta be young. So you want young bees. So you want freshly, recently emerged bees, because they're the ones that are gonna do the work that you do. I just listened to a conference the other day from Michigan, and she said that she likes them to be over 5 days old. So I thought that was interesting. I'm usually good after 3 to 5 days after I make that builder is when I graft into it. So like a lot of times I'll make it. Queen rearing is 100% calendars and timing. So you gotta write stuff down and be on the ball with your timings. Otherwise you'll have a lot of heartbreak. But like I like to make my builders like on Tuesday or Wednesday. And then I like to graft on the weekend. And then that way the next week I can make my splits on the weekend because I have a day job. That's just my system. You don't have to follow. But the idea here is that you can make a builder out of anything. You can make one in a nuke and put maybe 2 or 3 grafts in it, maybe up to 6. I'd probably keep it under 6 for sure. It's quantity. Quantity will make quality. So you got to have a ton of bees because it's a very it's hard work to raise queens, to raise good queens. Like you gotta have a lot of hands. I think I read somewhere it's like 7,000 visits to that larva from the time they start feeding that to the time it's capped. 7,000 visits. So if you think about that, if you have 40 grafts in there, you gotta have enough bees to be able to do that. So the idea there is you want to have a strong, appropriately sized builder for the amount of queens that you're raising. So if you want to raise 2 or 3 queens, you could do it in a nuke for sure. We've done like up to maybe 10 in a nuke just for experimentation. It works fine. You can use double, you can use nuke, you can use a single beak, you can use all kinds of things. So there's beekeeping you can make work with pretty much anything. You just got to figure out your system for it for sure. The other thing too, my builder is I'm always feeding. So I always have a feeder in there and I always have a pollen patty available to them, a piece of a pollen patty anyways. A lot of times they never touch it, but I have it there anyways. So this is what I want a builder to look like right there. Actually, that's even a little light. Like I want it, literally when I pull that lid off, I want it to boil out with bees. I want it to have a beard on the front of the hive. Like I want it jammed with bees, just chock full. No room in there. So this conference that I listened to, I think it's Angie's Bees. That's her right there in the card in their Zoom. This is one of her builders, and this is her method right here of doing it. So she does 2 frames of pollen, 4 frames of capped emerging brood, 2 to 3 frames of nectar, a feeder, and space for your grafting frame. That's what works for her. There's a lot of different ways to do this.
Can you read that again?
Yeah, so it's 2 frames of pollen, 4 frames of capped and emerging brood, 2 to 3 frames of nectar, a feeder, and space for your grafting. I'm not gonna argue with her. She makes a lot of queens. She does this full time and very successful, but I want more bees than that. I want more than 4 frames of emerging brood. I like to have more like 6 frames of emerging brood and maybe a frame of pollen and nectar. Then I have my blank and a feeder in there. But sometimes it changes, right? It depends what I got for resources. And when I say dark brood, I mean like dark chocolate colored brood, like literally they're emerging out. That's what I want to make my builder with. So you can see where you gotta have a lot of hives to make this method work a lot of times. So you gotta be able to steal from different things. So grafting, this is just my comments on here. I would say the big thing is take your time. Don't be rushed, which I'm always rushed and I rarely ever take my time, but your quality will be impacted if you rush. So take your time, it'll pay dividends for sure. Get comfortable. When I started doing this inside of a house, with air conditioning on and comfortable, my success, my takes went way up versus doing it on a steering wheel in a truck with no air conditioning and bees buzzing around my head and stuff like that. I started to have way more success. So the other thing is relax. So, you know, the guy from University of Golf, he says like he likes to put on some jazz. He likes to walk around the room a couple times before he does it, just to kind of relax and get the jitters out and sit down and do it. Light makes a big difference, for sure. Doesn't matter if you have young eyes or old eyes. Light will never do you harm in this situation. You might want some light magnification. What I use is, I don't know, like back in the day, people had these little arm magnifiers, like in a doctor's office, or like to tie flies, or to do needlepoint and stuff like that, whatever you're into. Like I like a 3x magnifier for me. Anything more than that is too much. And I don't have great eyes, as you can tell, but 3 works perfect for me, and it works pretty good for everybody else that I've trained. But that magnifier is for more than just trying to find that larva and pick it up. If you have that magnifier, you can double check your work as you're putting it in the cups. Because the big thing here is when you graft that larva out of there, it's kind of like catching a pancake on a skillet or in a fry pan. If you sit there and you take your spatula, all you're gonna do is push that pancake around the griddle and stuff like that. And you'll do the same thing with a larva. So like one of the best pieces of advice was watching the video from University of Golf. I can share that with you. Is he said like you gotta get aggressive with it a little bit, not too much, but a little bit. You kind of gotta punch it and just like I literally graft like that when I is which it kind of slips underneath that larva without rolling it over, without pushing it around in the cell, without doing whatever. And sometimes I'll bust the comb around it, especially if it's new comb. It doesn't matter to me. So the other thing here is you want to have like a damp towel. I think one of the conferences I listened to, one of the speakers from the conference on Saturday, they said they use socks. I don't really understand how that works. I like blue shop towels personally because they don't have lint. So I'll put a blue shop towel with warm water, and I'll put that over my frame when I pull it out of the hive to bring it into my house. So I'll have like 3 of those shop towels and I'll wrap it around it. So our friend over here with the turkey tail, turkey feathers, that's my favorite thing to get bees off of. Anything as a turkey tail, I'll use the cup side and I'll just use it to flick the bees off of the frame. They don't get angry like they do with a brush. I have much better success. I don't want to shake a frame of larva because you're going to dislodge the larva. So again, make sure you catch that. I don't want to shake the bees off that frame that I'm going to graft from because you're going to mess up the larva. So I want to just carefully flick the bees off with the feather, and then I'll put that towel around it and I'll walk into the house and set up my grafting station like on a kitchen table or something like that. Sometimes I'll use a table. Used to do it like in the corner of my shed or on the tailgate of the truck, whatever I have, depends on the situation. So that's kind of how I like to do it. These are some grafting tools. So this one, it might be kind of hard to figure this out. It took me a minute to look at it. I'm like, that looks kind of weird. It looks like old whatever magnifier glasses. And what they're trying to show you is what the ends of the tool look like here. So there's one that's more rounded and it just has that angle, and this other one has like a step. The secret to grafting tools is finding one that works for you. So some people love these, some people love hooks, some people like the Chinese grafting tools. I use the Chinese grafting tools, which are these right here. They're a plastic body. I like the ones with bamboo on this little doodad right there. But some people love this method and do really well. You just got to find out what works for you. So the idea here is you're taking that. This has like a soft piece of plastic on there, and you're kind of just underneath there, kind of like, again, the pancake. So you're sliding underneath there, and then you're carefully, so you're at the same time, you have your finger on the plunger on the top. So when you go down, you got the plunger in. Then when you pick it up, you're gonna lift it up, and then I'm gonna put it in a cup, and that's when I release that plunger and it lays that larva out. Now, you're gonna screw this up, no doubt about it. So the magnifier is really the key. The important part here is there's a whatever way that larva is laying, when you graft, you want to put in the cup the same way. So if you flip that larva, they're gonna drown. So they only have holes to breathe open on this side. So if you roll them, they drown in the royal jelly that the workers are gonna put in there. So that's why having that magnifier, it's gonna improve your success rate big time. So you want to be careful of this, and this takes some practice. I would say you'll kind of get the hang of it after. I mean, some people do it the first time and they have great success. I think a couple hundred grafts, you'll start to get the hang of it. And you could do that in a nuke. Like, it doesn't have to be in a big, you don't have to have a big builder hive. And when you see that they're not good takes, you can go graft again that day. Like, you don't have to wait a long time for it, but practice, 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 practice. And just take your time with it. Don't get too frustrated. This is another hive tool. I think they call this a German grafting tool. I don't know why, but it's kind of looks like a dental pick or something like that. So it's got like a straight edge here, and then it's got this hook. So the idea is that you're kind of going underneath the larva and then just picking them up and then laying them in a cup. I had pretty good success with this, actually. So I shake quite a bit. So the longer that tool is, the worse I do with it. So I'll actually put my elbow against my side, and I'll put my hand against the comb on the frame so that I don't shake too much when I do it. But you just kind of got to figure your method of doing it. There's a lot of tricks. Practice is the only way you get better. So this is, you don't have to have this, but this is well worth your time. This is a grafting station. There's a bazillion different designs. The idea is the frame sits in here, and then you have it kind of cocked at a 45-degree angle so that the light gets in there and lights up the larva that you're trying to see clearly. And then this right here, this holds your cell bar where you have your cups, this thing right here. So this would lay like this with the cups in it, and then you graft right into the cups that stick in here, these cups right here. So yeah, it's crazy just the cost of some of this stuff. Like, I was looking, I bought, I don't know, 30 of these 2 years ago at a Queen event where we were doing some II work. I bought them from a lady down in Kentucky that has a neighbor that makes them for me. I think I was getting them for $30 or something from this guy. And like, now these are every bit of $50. Every bit of it. So here, this is a guy doing it the way I used to do it. What I would do is I usually have 2 veils in my truck. So I would put 1 veil over the steering wheel so I didn't get that all covered up with propolis. And then I would lay the frame on, I would put the seat forward so I could rest the frame like on my belly across the steering wheel. And then I would use a headlamp just like this. And I would graft right from here into the after a while, I kind of got good at it. My friend's truck didn't have air conditioning, so I didn't do really well with that truck. With my other truck that I had with air conditioning, I did much better because I wasn't sweating as much. Trying to worry about it, but my success got way better once I started coming in the house. So here, if you want, you can get up to look at this because you probably can't see it from where you're at. This is the age of the larva you want. So there's a couple of things to pay attention in this picture. So they're just starting to feed them. up here. So you can see some royal jelly. So that means that that egg has hatched. So 3 days, the egg hatches. So that's about the age you want. Like they just barely hook, like right here, here, here. Like these are okay too. Like just a slight curve on them is okay. But you want as young as you can possibly move. The younger they are like this, the harder they are to graft. When they're more like this, they're much easier to graft. So you can see the Chinese grafting tool here, where it's just kind of scooping it, and you can see where it's blowing out some of the wax, because it's a new frame of foundation.
So you could graft like a brand new egg, it's just you're more liable to bust it or.
The new egg is, you're not gonna have a lot of success with it because it's gonna be dry. And it's gonna dry out, so chances are they won't go to it, and it'll dry out just from the movement of you walking from the truck to the hive, or walking from your kitchen table or your garage or wherever you're doing it to the hive will probably dry it out. So like when I walk back to the hive, that's covered in that blue towel that's damp, just to make sure they don't dry out. And I'm pretty picky about that to make sure that's how it happens. So yeah, you can kind of see here they won't feed them until that egg is hatched. So when you start seeing the liquid in here, you know that it's hatched. And that probably means that they've been hatched for at least half a day to a day when you start seeing the royal jelly. So mating nukes, I brought in a couple of different ones that I have here. When we finish, you can kind of poke around and look at this. They're not super clean, and I guarantee there's no mice, but they might be a mess. I don't know, we'll have to look, but this is a couple of different systems that I use. These right here suck. So this is what everybody wants to buy and everybody wants to use. These are horrible. I will tell you, these will cause you much heartache and frustration. I cuss at these things so much. They're so fragile. They're just too small, in my opinion, really to raise good queens inside of here. And the reasoning behind it is a couple of reasons. So you can see inside of here, there's 3 frames of comb right here, right? So what I do is, you can see this is plastic foundation. I cut these on a friend's bandsaw, and then I hot glue them into the top of the frame. That's just how I do it. I've seen somebody like put a rubber band around there to hold it. I have different levels of success with this. What I found works for me pretty good is I try and cut these the exact size. I bought some of these from China. I forget if it was from John or if it was AliExpress or something, or both, I don't know. But I have like 2, maybe 3 different kinds of these, and they're slightly different in the size frames. So I cut a bunch of this foundation from old stuff that I scraped or whatever, and just trying to reuse it. Gorilla Glue works the best for me to glue it into there. That's kind of how I do it. Then this compartment right here, there's a queen excluder right there to make sure she doesn't get through to the feeder. And this is just an area where you can fill with syrup. We don't use syrup anymore in here. We use like a mush of sugar. So it's like kind of like magic sand consistency, kind of like what I like to put on winter hives, where it's just barely damp sugar, and I'll put it down in there, and I don't have bees drowning in it and problems and stuff like that. But I always feed these. So the trouble with these is they hate drawing this comb. And the other thing is like they're either flush or bust. So they either plug this all up with honey, or they don't do anything to it. And they have scum. So the other trick to these too is you want to buy some pheromone strips, which are very expensive, but I'm kind of cheap with it, thrifty, frugal, whatever the right word is you want to find. I clip them into at least 3, sometimes 4 pieces, and then I'll hot glue that on the inside of the lid. And that pheromone will usually keep the bees from absconding from here. Because a lot of times they're like, this is a hopeless situation, we're out. So the other thing I did was Mac helped me out and made some boxes. I need to make some more of those. He made me some supers out of some stuff that he had laying around the shop. And what he did is he made like channels for these to fit into. And then I put these inside of a hive when they're on a honey flow. And I just let them draw them and plug them up with honey. Then what I do is I'll put one of these in here with honey, because that acts as my feed. And then I have, maybe one with some comb from previous years and then one without. But like you can see, it's a lot of fuss, a lot of hassle with this thing. And these are such a pain. And then down here, this opens and closes to give them warmth or to cool them down. This slides up and down to either open it or close it. So, University of Golf has some really good videos about these, how they do it. If you have raccoons in your area, I would highly recommend that you put bricks on top of this. And I would even say maybe strap it with the brick. Cause they like to go in here and just make a mess and tear it up like the raccoons do.
But
So this is one style. Sorry.
what is the purpose of this?
This is a mating.
Okay,
So what I do is I put a couple bees in here. So I'll go through some strong hives, I'll find the queen, then I'll shake nurse bees into a bucket or a tub. And I'll take a couple of bees and I'll dump them in here, and then I'll close this up. And I'll take this to another yard where I'll introduce a queen cell inside of it. So these are to get queens mated up.
Okay, so how do they mate in there? How does that work?
She flies out here when she's ready, and then go find some fellows, and then comes back in and starts laying eggs. So it's no different than a hive or a new, it's just a little version. So there's a lot of fuss with this. These are really made for somebody that runs like a couple hundred queens at a time or thousands of queens at a time. Like the guy I buy packages from probably runs about 20,000 of these in that neighborhood, because he's rolling 5,000 to 20,000 queens a week.
That's called a California mating.
This is a California mini mating. Yeah. So there's some different, I have some pictures of some other ones. So this is a piece of plastic that just goes on top to kind of keep them in this compartment. It fits in this notch. This is one of the better made ones. This is this is probably one from Better Bee. I bought some nice ones from them. These have gone through the roof too. Like when I first started buying these were like, they were like $10 from China, or they were like $20 from the stores. I think these are now, I think I saw them for $48 a piece, which is just bonkers. And I think,
Do like a 3-frame.
yeah, there's a lot of different ways.
Okay.
I'm just saying that you'll see this a lot.
Okay.
Don't do it. You'll have so much frustration. I mean, if you like to fiddle, and plus, give it a try. I'll give you some if you wanna try them. They drive me bonkers. I probably had, I don't know, 150 of them. So this is my favorite method I have right here. So before John got as big as he is now, he used to do some custom work. So this was a custom job that he did for me, and this is complete of dead bees. So, what this is 2-3 frames, that I'll have eggs or larvae on. So usually I like larvae because the nurse bees will stay with it, they won't abscond. But I'll usually put like a frame of dark brood and then, a mixed frame of both in here. So I don't want a ton of brood, I don't want a ton of bees in here, so it's kind of a balance. And then this is a board that divides this up and it goes flush down to the bottom. And you can see there's an entrance on both sides there. And I can close or open this based on what I want. I can put it on queen excluder, I can put it on vent, or I can leave it wide open. So I put a piece of bubble wrap, as you saw, across the top, just to kind of keep them. If I was smart, I would probably staple the piece of bubble wrap in here, because then you could just lift up one side and not have the other bees, but I've never really had a lot of trouble with it. So this, what I'll do is I'll introduce a cage. So a lot of times, I personally like to let my queens emerge in an incubator. So that's just my method. So I'll just slip that virgin queen in there, then let them chew that sugar plug out, just like you would in your hive with your pack.
What do you mean by an incubator?
I mean, an incubator like you would hatch chickens. So at day 10, I'll pull my cells out and I'll put them in an incubator in cages. I'll show you that in a second. But that's just how I like to do it, because we're doing volumes and I don't necessarily have splits ready, or because I'm always kind of doing stuff last minute or shuffling things around or waiting for people to buy queens, or because nothing ever worked out perfect. Like people don't come and buy queens when you need them to buy queens. They want their queens when you don't have queens, and they want queens when they want queens and stuff like that. as much as you might say, hey, I have queens available on Saturday, they'll call you on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and ask you for them on that day. So it doesn't always work out perfect. And like if your queens are gonna emerge on, you know, a Saturday or a Sunday, and you pull that queen on a Monday out of here, then this is gonna get laid up with queen cells inside here, so you gotta deal with that. So that's why I like them in an incubator, because I can let them live in there for a little bit, or I can move those into a queenless hive and I'll tend those queens, for me. Like again, my scale is different, so we're raising, you know, 200 to 1,000 queens a year, depending on the year. So it just depends, like what we have going on. You can use a lot of other things, and I got some pictures. The ticket here is find your system for your size and your scale and what you have laying around, like don't necessarily buy or make special equipment for it. So here you can kind of see the whole system of the mini nuke right here. So a couple frames, a feeder, entrance to turn it off or open it up, vents on the bottom, that kind of thing. This is called a queen castle, and you can get these with 3 frames or 2 frames in each compartment. You can make this out of your deeps, like when you're putting together new hardware now, you can take your deep before you assemble it and just put a saw kerf down here, maybe 2 saw kerfs, and you can just slide a piece of glue on in there to divide it up if you want. And then you can reuse that then as a deep later on as well, if you want to. I'm kind of a big fan of multiple things out of a piece of hardware rather than having custom equipment for stuff. This is to hold a jar feeder on top of there, and you'll see the entrances around. There's a lot of different ways to build these. This is an entrance, maybe that's probably an entrance. I wouldn't do it that way because I don't want all the queens emerging and the workers in the same spot. I would space it up. I would put an entrance here, and then I would put one on that side on the bottom, and then maybe another one on the, or I'd probably do this one here, and then this one on the side or something like that, just to kind of keep the bees moving around. So that, for me, I don't like queen castles personally. A lot of people love them. I don't like them because I'll get behind because I have so many different nukes going and hives and doing things and a job and stuff like that. So this can tend to get plugged up with honey, or it'll get plugged up with brood, and it's just, you gotta juggle them and keep frames moving around. I like a larger, like 3 frames or even 5 frame nukes for my mating, because I want her to lay, ideally I want her to lay for 3 weeks before I pull her. That's just my way. Here you can see what that, this is just a different kind, but this is what it looks like inside. And then a lot of times they'll put a vent with some hardware cloth on there. This is a larger version of the styrofoam ones. There's a guy, Jason Bragg, that I buy breeder queens from. This is what he runs. He likes them a lot. I've had kind of mixed luck with them. They have like basically a half frame size inside of it. These are probably more my speed right here. Like I like 5 frame nukes. These are probably 4 frames, but you'll see a feeder inside of there. That's kind of the way I like it. I wouldn't set them like this on the bricks that close. I usually spread them out a little bit more, and I'll randomly put them around just so that my queens don't get mixed up and go into the wrong hive. So I like to put some space, and I like to reorient entrances, and I hate white paint for hives, and I hate consistency. So I have every color under the rainbow for stuff. So I like that because it helps the queens kind of figure out which is their box. Does it always work? No. So this is a yard where I had some mating nukes as well as some hives. So like here you can see both sides of it. So here you can see hives that I'll pull frames of brood and stuff like that for my mating nukes. This is just some spare equipment stacked up there. There's, I don't know, maybe 40-ish full-size hives in there. And then this, oops, sorry. This here, you can kind of see them over here. These are mating nukes in that tall grass because I didn't get to mow it at the right time there. But place is loaded with ticks. But I usually have them in like a star pattern. You'll see a better picture of it here in a second. And I kind of space them out. Sometimes I put them on pallets. Sometimes I put them down in the grass. It kind of depends what I have available to me. It was just a pretty sunset too. So. That's my beach up there too. So here's, I'm just making splits. So this is my moment, hooray, there's eggs. So now I can make a split, and I'm just splitting off a big hive into a little hive. These are some styrofoam 5-frame nukes. I really like styrofoam a lot. I love those styrofoam nukes. A lot of people hate them. I like them quite a bit. They're screened on the bottom. So they're like R6 insulation versus R1 from wood. And I think just like us in our houses, insulation is good during the summer as well as at night. So here you can see eggs laid up here, a sick bee or two on that frame. Yeah, so you can see they're tending the larva right here. Their tongues are out. So the other ticket here is like having a lot, you got to have a lot of hardware laying around. So you got to mix and match and pull things and move it all around. Kara came out and helped me in that bee yard 3-4 times or something like that. And that's kind of what we're always doing, is looking for cleanings and stuff. So here you can see, this is I think that's a Latshaw queen right there. We traded some stuff with Randy Washburn. So that's one off of his breeder queen. The Latshaws, I think, started $800 and go to $2,200 for his breeders. So a little rich for me. Here's just 5 caged, ready to go. I like these California mini cages because you don't have to spread the frames apart as far to fit a 3-hold one like you get in your packages. Is one better than the other? I don't know. I just like these personally. Talk about how much price has gone up. A box or a case of these used to be like 200 and some change, and right now it's just shy of $500 plus shipping to get this box of, I don't know, 800 cages or something like that. So there's a lot of labor in that. So those are all handmade. But yeah, these have sugar plugs in them, ready to go to customers. But beautiful queen before she got her colors. So marking queens. This is something, there's definitely some art to this. Get some queen cages or save your ones from your package. You can practice. One of the first things I do when I do a queen rearing workshop is I get you comfortable moving and handling bees. And that's something that takes practice and more practice and more practice. So I'll give frames of bees to people and say, here, practice picking up these bees and putting them in a cage. You know, and really what it starts off with is practice picking up this bee. And then practice putting it into a cage, right? That's a 2-step process sometimes, because a lot of times they're like, you know, trying to get used to like how much pressure to use, how much or whatever, or you're worried that you're gonna get stung or something like that. And it's just after a while, it just becomes repetition and figure it out.
Are you using like tongs or tweezers to do that, or?
Use these, right?
Yeah.
And actually, what's funny is I'm right-handed. What's that?
You wanted to ask the same question.
Yeah, I know, it's good. You'll see a picture of it actually here in a minute. Usually I'm by myself when I'm doing it. Tiny tweezers. Usually I'm by myself, so it's really hard to get pictures when I'm doing it. So I need to be better at keeping my GoPro on me with it. Of course, I could have great blooper reels, so that's for sure. As long as I turn the audio off so you don't hear me.
That just changes the rating.
Right. 'Cause I do get colorful now and then. So yeah, I'm right-handed. So I always have my marking pen either in this pouch or in my chest pocket. So it just depends. A lot of times I leave it in the pocket because I'm going and like getting in the truck and moving around, and I don't want it to fall out of that pocket. Because I buy different pens that don't have the clips, so they come out and then I lose them and then I don't know where they're at. And they're at least a couple of bucks, up to about $12. A marking pen. So it's just an acrylic paint pen. So I usually pick up the queen with my left hand and then I'll mark her and then I'll set her back on the frame. That's how I do it. There's a lot of different ways. There's some tools here. Yeah, so color scheme. This is going to be, you know, based on the last year, last digit of the year is for what colors. So there you go. I never remember. I always Google it. And so I gotta go buy my pens here.
There's no pink.
Green is usually
Well, pink is.
red, because the red ones are usually.
Yeah, so I found that out, like the red, I found that they like to chew the red. So I started using like a hot pink and they didn't tend to take it off. And the other thing is my customers liked it a lot better because it was much easier to see than red. The red is really hard to catch on, especially dark colored bees. When they're running around in high
Those the same thing, they like chewing the red off.
And I think it might have to do with the paint pen too. Because I've had some of them that chew more than others, but I rarely have them chew any color other than red. For some reason they hate red, so I always kind of grumble a little bit when that's a red year. So that, and usually I'm not smart enough to buy the pink one right off the bat, so I'll buy the red one and then I'll go buy the pink one. And I can tell you, I get some interesting looks and I get judged a lot when I go to Michael's to buy my paint pen. So here, this is a handy little tool.
It's okay.
Yeah, that's, well, the funny part was when I bought nukes, I would go in and buy needlepoint plastic. And finally, like I noticed they're all like, you know, this, because I would go in and I'd buy like 100 sheets of needlepoint plastic. And they're like, you like to do needlepoint a lot. They're like, no, actually, it's the vent screen for nukes, for bees to sell bees. So this is a ring, and then it's got like these little, it's almost like thread across here. This is a plastic one. The plastic ones are junk. Buy the wooden one from Better Bee. Again, how much things have gone up. They've always been proud of those rings, but they're I think they're selling them for $30-something at the Bee Expo, and they used to be like $15 to $18 for that ring. I 3D print them now, but the 3D printed ones last me like a week before they get busted. Cindy Kinnett had a really good idea. She chews this gum that's in a plastic box. So she keeps the cage in that plastic box in her pocket so it doesn't get smashed. But the idea here is you just kind of set this down over the bees, and then you just push it down to the point where she squats. So as soon as her legs bend, you're good, and you can put the dab of paint on. So she won't be able to move around. And here you can see afterwards, I like to leave that ring on and kind of count to 10, and then I'll pull the ring off. There's a lot of times the other bees will come up there and try and lick the paint off or get it off, and sometimes they get flighty. So like when I mark them, I like to have her stay put for a minute and then let her go, because if I take that ring right off, most of the time she flies, which is pretty frustrating. So here, you can kind of see how I have the nukes in a star pattern here. So what I do, I always do this. I dab my hand first before I mark the queen. So that way I don't have a big blob of paint and drown her. Everybody's probably had that's tried to mark queens. So I always dab my hand first, and then actually sometimes I'll even do it 2 or 3 times, and then I'll dab her. So I just use my fingers. Most of the time I'm wearing gloves. Sometimes I have to take the gloves off to do it, to have the dexterity. If I have propolis on my fingers, I can't wear the gloves because it'll stick to her wings. And it just kind of becomes a mess. But yeah, that's kind of how I do it. So problems. This is what happens, right? Is there's always problems with raising queens. So one of the big ones is that they don't get mated, and that can happen for a ton of reasons. Like right now, I'm dreading what spring is going to look like. I think everybody's all fired up and thinks it's going to be sunshine and rainbows. I personally think it's going to be cold and wet in April, and it's going to be a mess. So it's really hard to make queens for nukes that we sell. The first batch is always a nightmare. Sometimes it takes 4 weeks, 5 weeks for her to get mated, just because of weather and temperature and problems and not having enough drones and all the things.
How do you know if she's mated or not mated?
You see eggs.
Okay.
So you're gonna see eggs on the frame. So one of the other problems, so I would say solution for the queens not mated. Number one, you shouldn't be grafting until you see purple-eyed pupa. So your drones need to be purple-eyed before you graft, or better yet, emerge. So I have hives that have drones in them right now. I don't think they ever left for the winter. Have you seen that too on yours, Joe?
No, I haven't. I don't know what's going.
I had it last year too. I had some drones make it through the winter. It's super weird looking in and like peeking in when the fall spring and seeing drones in there.
He's a freeloader.
You guys didn't get the message, but yeah, so make sure you have drones, and a lot of drones. Like to raise queens, you need a lot of drones. So like if you're planning on doing more than like a dozen queens, you probably need to have like 50-ish hives out there to be able to have the drone population. Because ideally you want about 20 drones mating per queen. So that's a great goal to shoot for. A lot of commercial queens might have 1, 2, or 3, and then you'll see that that's when they poop out and start laying drones or something like that. Joe, were you gonna ask a question?
You use drone comb to raise drones?
I've tried, and I don't have success with it. Mike has success with it. Sometimes, most of the time they make honey out of it. So then most of the time they always draw it and make honey. What I like instead, we jokingly call it the Lavazza Special, which is my friend Mike that helps me out with stuff. So what we do is we take a medium frame and put it between 2 drawn deeps. And what they'll do is they'll lay beautiful drone comb on the bottom of it. And I have far better success with that than I do with green frames.
Okay.
So the other thing here is like, I'm kind of a queenering nerd for this stuff for sure. I want to treat my drones like I treat the queens. So like the larvae and the hives that are making queens, I want to treat the hives that are making my drones the same way. Because I want good, strong, healthy, well-fed drones because they're going to make better mated queens. So if you put in a deep frame of drone comb, that's what 6,500-ish cells or something like that. And you have the same problem where it's 7,000 visits to take care of that larva. And if you just put all that in there, chances are a lot of those drones are going to be nutritionally deficient, starved, whatever.
My brother-in-law likes to smash them.
Teach their own, man. I
Shouldn't have to
use
stop.
those to practice picking up bees, and then use those to practice marking. Just after you mark them, pop them. So squish them, because otherwise you'll have all these drones running around with marking on it. Like, oh, there's my queen, and then you look closer and see that's not. So from experience. So like a lot of times when I
Well, it's like an Easter egg. Mark the drone black or something, so you know they're not really.
figure out your system, for sure. So like when I do queen rearing classes, I'll always have drones running around that are marked. So which is okay for us, because a lot of times we're taking those drones to do instrumental insemination and stuff like that, so it doesn't matter. They're gonna die anyways. So the cells torn down, there's a lot of reasons for that. And what I mean is like you'll see these beautiful queen cups and then they'll have a gash down the side of it, or they'll actually just literally chew the cell back up to the cup and cannibalize the larva. And that can happen for a lot of reasons. Number one, it usually happens because they're nutritionally deficient. So they don't have pollen and or nectar. So remember, pollen is their protein, nectar is their carbohydrates, right? So if they don't have good feed, they're gonna say, this is a waste of our resources and time, we're not gonna raise these queens. So they'll turn them down. The other main reason, especially if it's a gash down the side, is you have a queen inside of that hive. So what we do on our builders is we use a bottom board, then we put a queen excluder, and we put our box, and then we put another queen excluder on top of it for good better. So that way queens can't come from underneath and they can't come from on top if we do something. It still happens. We usually have, I don't know, a half dozen bars of queens ruined a year that queens come into. So the other thing I try and do is have my mating yards away from where I have my builder hives, so that I don't have those queens in that yard. So there's always swarming and stuff like that. So that's kind of your big reasons, is you have another queen in there, or you have nutrition problems or something like that. Small cells, usually nutrition, and you don't have enough bees. So you want a boiling hive of bees, like it should be covered in bees, like you shouldn't be able to see the paint on that hive, like just boiling with bees. So the overwax cells on the frame, what they'll do is they'll put bridge comb between the cells, and that usually means that they're on a good nectar flow and they need somewhere to put wax. So a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll put a new frame of foundation next to that frame where your cells are, so they have somewhere to go do some work. I'd rather have bees in there and cut the wax off personally, but so another trick here too is the frames that you're going to graft from. This is where you don't want to buy the Pureco triple wax or have like really thick wax frames that you use, because it's really hard to graft out of there when there's too much wax. Drone layers, that's just poor breeding. So they just didn't mate correctly, and then they're laying she usually is because she ran out of sperm or didn't have sperm in the first place. So you'll start seeing popcorn across the frame. And the only way to fix that sometimes you can get away with putting a cell in there and they'll come back, but a lot of times you just gotta combine it with another. So I think that's what I got. I know it's a lot of information. It's kind of overload. I have some queen cages here. My friend's son that I help out with some STEM stuff started making these for me. He basically copied a commercial design that's out there. So this holds our cages. These are all 3D printed. And this is what we put inside of our incubator. So we have some foam incubators, and then we have Mike just bought one that's a reptile incubator. It's a little nicer. So it's much more stable for sure. What other toys do I have? So these are the queen cups. So I'll check them out. Some of these are a lot harder to see the larvae in than others. I get an idea there. Not. This is the frame that the cell bars go into.
I think that it is helpful, like, to see the cups, like the bags, and how they go into the thing and how they go into the other thing. I'm very technical.
More work.
Okay. Like,
How you put the cups in the
well, like,
bar?
yeah, cause I think that, like, I've seen that, but like, to see like where you put the.
Yeah.
The larva and how it goes in there and all that, I think that that's hard to.
So here, these cells, these would go right in there like that. Their sheet of merch, and then these go like so. So then.
So like a larva would go inside that little red.
So we use different colors, so that way we know which grafts we have, so like we go between different breeder queens. We have different II genetics, instrumental and inseminated. So we have like Harbo VSH stock, who's the guy who kind of came up with VSH, rural sensitive hygiene. He's still kicking, thankfully. Last year he didn't have any queens. This year he has queens again. He's the guy that invented the whole standard and the whole way that you do the testing and those kinds of things. So I like him. He's a super nice guy. His wife kind of handles all the business practices, like a little grandma on the phone when she calls you, and she's super nice. Like she remembers you after the first year and asks you how things are going, and she knows where you live and all that. So just super nice people. I have breeders from Jason Bragg. I've had Latshot clones where we've actually II'd off of breeder queens. Done some crosses to have specific genetics, you name it. So then in your scales, really what you want to do is find a hive that you like. So you have a hive that performs really well, has a nice temperament to work with. Like you enjoy working those bees, and they're good producers and they're overwintered. Those are the ones to take, right? Just keep doing that. And then that way, when you have one that's not good, you're queen rich, not queen poor. So you can always, one that doesn't fit the grid, squish her and put in a new queen. Like you can make that decision where versus buying one for $35 or I mean, it's bonkers what I think Man Lake's selling them for $50-$60 this year. Something like that. And this other company down in Texas is selling those AFB inoculated ones for like $300 or something like that. That's crazy. So yeah, I mean, raise your own, raise a couple of queens, buy some queens from people that you like their bees, and or you want to support their programs. So like we do rural sensitive hygiene. They call it an assay where you pull frames out and you look to see if they're doing mite suppressive behavior, SMR, or if they're hygienic or doing capping on capping. So we do all that, and that means you got to take frames out of hives, shake the bees off, sit there, and take them out one at a time with tweezers and do 100 cells, and you have to look at the mites inside of there and see if they're reproductive or not. It's very tedious work, so it's definitely a labor load. It's a lot of work to it. So, questions? Anything else yet?
Just trying to summarize. My hive wintered over, full of bees. I'm gonna go in there, find the queen, put her in a nuke.
Yep.
3 frames, some old brood, new brood. 3 days later, well, mark the eggs. Now, I'm gonna do it on 2 or 3 different frames if I have.
Sure.
3 days. check it?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's a good
after
point.
10 days,
Yep, so a week later after you squish, make your splits.
pull them 3 frames, move them bees, now I've got 4 hives.
Sure. So I guess some important parts here is, and I'll talk about this in a lot of detail when we talk about splits and all that kind of stuff. That's a lot easier to talk to digest, but, you can rob from a bunch of different hives. You don't have to tear down one hive, so you can mix and match your frames. So as beekeepers, when you're going through and doing your inspections, you can steal from one and give to the other. You're always Robin Hooding it. So you're always stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. So you want to have all your hives balanced. Like that's your job as a beekeeper when you're doing your inspections. So we had that, like we would teach class and people are like, when you say work bees, what are you talking about? Like, what am I looking for when I'm doing these inspections? Like Kathy and I have had that conversation many times. Or other people is like, what am I looking for when I'm going through my hive for this stuff? And it's what you're doing is you're balancing everything out. Because if you have one that's weak and one that's strong, the strong will rob the weak and kill it or impair it for sure. So like always make them equal. That's your job. So sometimes that means pushing a queen and combining. We're doing something like that. And if you have these queens or if you have a nuke laying around, you have a lot more luxury of doing that. Where you're like, I don't want to do that. I want to have 2 hives because I want to have honey production. Or I want to have loose hive, or I just don't want to squish a queen or whatever. If you have a nuke, you're making a split. You have the ability to fix your own problems. You don't have to come drive to Bloomington and get a queen from me or get one through mail order or do whatever, those kinds of things. You can do it at your leisure. So that's kind of a good reason to do this. Now, I recommend bringing in genetics from other places too. But yeah, other questions? Somebody else had a question.
I'm gonna make some comment, because my thinking on when I share frames, I want more nurse bees than foragers.
It depends, right? So a lot of times what you're doing is you might have a powerhouse. You're like, I gotta suppress these girls or they're gonna go for riding the tree.
Right.
Right, they're gonna swarm. So I gotta go, what I wanna do for that hive is I might wanna pull 1, 2, 3 frames of dark brood. To tell them the cooler deals, right?
Right.
Relax. We can figure this out, right? And I'll take those and put them into one that's weak instead. So I kind of jokingly call it a bee bomb. Because it's an infusion of 6,500 bees that are there to do work. They're there to draw comb. They're there to take care of larvae and do all those things. So that's a game changer for a hive to get that boosted frame. So in a week, that'll be a completely different hive getting that other frame. And so you're always kind of shuffling between them. So your weak ones, you're saying, I need maybe 1, 2, 3 frames to boost this up. So maybe I steal 3 from this huge hive, or maybe I take 1 from these 3 hives to boost that weak one. So like I like to, when I go through bees, I'll usually have a nuke or 2. I mean, you kind of saw the hardware stacked up there. Like I'll always have some extra gear laying around to be able to pull. So I'll take one of these plastic nuke boxes with me, and then I can throw frames in there as I go. So when I see one that's super strong, because I'm running single deeps here, so I don't want too many bees in there, or they're gonna swarm on me. So I'm always kind of throttling. I want them about 7 frames of bees in that neighborhood. So like when I say a frame of bees, it's like each side of the frame covered with bees strong. Like I want 3 to 6-ish frames of brood or something like that in there. So that's kind of what I'm working on. And I kind of want to throttle my eggs to what the situation is. So I'll kind of move that between all my hives. So what I'll do is I'll put them in a box. Now, like this up here, you're probably like, what are all these frames stacked up here? So what these are, is this is where they plugged it up with honey. So I'll take those and I'll put them up here. Now, if I was a guy like Joe, where my stuff is tidy and neat and stuff like that, I would probably have them way over here, because a lot of people get paranoid that that's going to cause robbing. I've never really had much trouble with it. I'll just put them up here and let them rob that nectar out of those frames. And then once these are clean, the next time I go through there, I can then put that in between some other frames and maybe pull a frame of blank foundation that they haven't worked. And I can put that nice clean frame that they just did, put it right next to that queen and let her lay it up. So I can manipulate my frames around, get them to do what I want them to do, or at least try. So that's kind of what I'm doing when I'm going through all these, is kind of shuffling from one to the other. as I go through it.
So Tom, you talked about really your job is to keep the resources balanced among your hives.
Yep.
I've heard you need to have 2 hives so that you can sell when one's not doing well versus the other one, as opposed to just having one where you're not really sure if it's good or not.
Yes, because when you're starting, and even a couple of years, like, you don't necessarily know what's good and bad until you get some experience under your belt. And like, my friend Mike said it to me the best, is he's like, it didn't click for me until I came and worked bees with you and saw 6 hives or more next to one another, because you got to see good and bad and in between. And somebody could say, well, this one looks really good, or this one looks like trash. And then you kind of get you're able to put eyeballs on that, where if you have 1 hive or 2 hives, it might take you 6 years to see what you would see in one afternoon going through a stack of hives in that situation. So 2, that way you can say, well, are they both doing this weird thing? If they are, it's probably not weird. It's just something you don't know how to identify.
Sure. So then the question is, okay, what is your optimal number of hives to be able to do the balance?
So.
It depends on what you do.
So anybody that has, so like with chickens, they have this thing called chicken math. Where like you go to Farm and Fleet or Tractor Supply, I know what's happened to you. You're like, I'm gonna go buy 4 chicks, and you come out with 2 dozen, right? That's just kind of the way it goes, especially when they're $1 a piece, right? So you're like, oh, we'll figure it out, you know, that kind of thing. So like, it's kind of the same thing with bees, is like, you just gotta figure out how much work you wanna put into it and what you wanna get out of it, and it goes back to those goals. So I would say, like, at a minimum, you should have 2 hives. I know that's a ton of money. So, it's easy for me to stand up here and say that, but I know like 2 hives, you're gonna be like $1,000 in it, easy. With hardware and bees and all that stuff, so somewhere in that neighborhood. I mean, you can get away a little cheaper if you build some hardware, do some things, but you're probably looking at like $1,000 for 2 hives. And that's a big investment for something that might die. But those 2 is really where you wanna be, at least 2. So then you gotta figure out like what's right for you and how much time and effort you wanna put into it. I work bees 7 days a week when it's during season, for the most part. Sometimes not, and it depends, like it rains, I still work bees when it rains sometimes. Just because we gotta do things when we gotta do things, and it doesn't matter if it's nice out or not. So like, I'll be working here, this was like sunset, probably 8 o'clock at night. I'm going through hives at dusk until I can't see. That's just my practice because I have a day job, right? So I gotta do it when I have time. Or on the weekend, I might have some other activity that I wanna do or need to go to, or do something else, or I gotta go to a place and sell honey, or farmer's market, or those kinds of things. I don't have time to work bees, so I gotta do it during the night. So it's just, you gotta figure out how much time and effort you wanna put into it. Some people, they say, I want 1 hive. Like, Kathy wants 2. Like, that's her goal. She wants 2 so that she has 1 as backup for the other things. That's as much as she wants. She doesn't want more. You get new, a split. So like, that's been your goal, is to make a split.
And I
This
did
year,
last, I
it's
just,
gonna be-
well, like, no, I did last summer, but it went up to 4 and then down to 2 and then up to 3 and then, the lesson learned last year was just that.
Gotta get a little more aggressive.
I think it was really kind of trying to get into Queen's Head.
When to cut your losses, right?
Yeah.
That's
Because
where I meant this.
because it's hard. It was hard for me to understand that not all queens will do their job. You know what I mean? Like, you think, oh, it's a queen, so it has its function, that's what it's going to do. But some just didn't want to do it. And I didn't know that.
But like, I had like 9, 10 hives, and I was great, except it was a swarm, and I'd see them in the trees, so I'd put them in a new hive, then another swarm. And by the end of that spring, I had like 22 hives. That was not what I want. It's kind of like, oh, I never had enough equipment.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is like how much hardware you want. Like, you should probably have an extra box or 2 around, definitely want some extra frames. I would recommend a bottom or a top. Sometimes you gotta make things do, like, you don't necessarily have to have a fancy top. Like, I every time there's elections, I'll put on my Facebook, anybody have corrugated plastic signs? So I'll use those political signs for a lot of things. I'll use it as dividers, I'll use it as covers, I'll use it as whatever. Cause I might have to make a split. I might not have the hardware sitting here. I can just put that plastic cover on there, put a brick on there and walk away and deal with it in a day or two. I don't have to make something happen at that exact moment. I can put it underneath for a ventilated bottom and let them warm up a little bit, or I can use it for a mite drop board, or I can use it as a divider or something. They're pretty handy to have around. So I like to use those for things. You can cut some pieces of plywood like this right here. This is made out of Adventech, which is like floorboard in a house. It's treated with something or another. Spray them or paint them a couple times, put way more coats than you think you need on it. If you're using the particle and type stuff, because it will suck in moisture. So I found this Adventech, this stuff's probably like 5 years old, something like that. It's pre-coated for sure on this, and it's still holding up. It will warp a little bit, so they'll be cupped here. But yeah, they glue these on pretty good. That's just bubble wrap like you would put around a hot water heater or something. That's just how I do it. I always say every year I'm gonna do it, is I wanna get them cut for underneath my migratory lids, so I have the bubble wrap there too. I mean, it's just you learn tricks of how to make things work. You don't have to have the fanciest, nicest stuff. Or that's the other thing about a mentor. You can be like, oh snap, I got something going on here, I need help. Hey, PK, can I borrow a lid? Or, something like that. Like I've given people feeders and stuff like that when they're in a pinch for something until they can get one, mailed in from Man Lake or John or something. So that's another reason to have mentors.
Do you, with your splits, do you use like you do with your queen rearing? Do you use a screen, a queen excluder on the bottom for your splits as well, always, or is it kind of?
I don't.
Yeah.
I kind of let things happen.
Yeah.
So sometimes you get a queen fly in there, they'll just kill each other and won't work out usually. Once in a while they kill each other, they kill both of them, but pretty rare. So like, again, it's a different thing if you're raising 3 queens or if you're hatching out 40, emerging out 40, at a time. So like we might have 40 emerge out and I might set 35 in splits. Sometimes I just don't have enough bees. Where I'll post and say, hey, I got some virgin queens if somebody wants some or something like that. Like I'd like to get people in the club and areas around here to get more comfortable with how to use a virgin queen to introduce in your own hive. Because it saves you a bunch of money. And the other thing is you can take the genetics from me and cross it with your overwintered stock that you left. So it's a good way to infuse some genetics with what you have. So there's a lot of like Corey Stevens that we had talked, was that last month? That's his jam. He raises thousands of virgin queens and sells them.
New queen every year for you, or?
It's like asking a religious question. So for me, I replace the queen when she needs to be replaced. So I have a hard time pinching queens. So like I hate squishing them. Even I'll usually give them like 3 tries to straighten their act out.
And that's why
I give them more chances than I should.
going through the hives and you can start seeing patterns. And so she's doing this, and all of a sudden the pattern starts changing, then you've got an idea of what's happening. So.
But if I like her and she's doing good and then great patterns, there's no reason to replace her.
Even
No.
if she's like 3 or 4 or 5 years old.
3, 4, 5 years, she's gotta go, but like, unless it's a breeder, right? So like my breeders, I run those in smaller hives so I can control her, because she's only got so much in her, right? So once she runs out, she's done, so that might be, I feel like Harbo is, I think now he's $400 for his provens and $250 for his unprovens, and that's dirt cheap for a breeder queen. Lashaws, I think, start at $800 and go up to $2,000 for it. Like if you want ones in May, they're like $2,500. Soup cobies are at least $2,000. So like they can go up to 5.
You better know what you're doing.
You don't buy that for casual queenery, like you buy it from somebody else, right? So they'll put that investment into it because they want those genetics. Like we're breeding for specific traits, so we want, and sometimes those harbors are trash. That's the other thing too. Like I bought some of those $250 queens or even a $400 queen and she's trash. She didn't lay well. She didn't raise good offspring. It's like us. We're not all NFL, MLB, those things. We all have different traits. Like not everybody's a rock star. So you never know. That's why you select, you go through your stuff. And if it's not performing to what, as you get better working your bees, you get to the point where you're like, you gotta go. You're not pulling your weight. It's like the chicken that doesn't lay an egg, right? You gotta make some changes here. So you replace her out. If she's mean, if she's not producing honey the way you like or something like that, you gotta take action. That's kind of what we're doing, is we're just doing it at a couple hundred times. Anything else? Yep.
All right, so we're gonna change queens for mite control. Is Formic Pro,
That's another.
Yeah,
right, so I just changed my queen,
I like
but
Formic.
I
Pro.
want a tree.
I like Formic Pro a lot, but it's hard on queens. But I'm queen rich, so who cares? If she gets smoked, I'll put another one in there.
Well, now how about the, put one for 20 days?
Yeah, you gotta find your system, right? So my system may not be your system. So like if I were a casual person with 1 or 2 hives, I probably wouldn't use Formic, or I would use Formic in the one pad for, what is it, 2 weeks, and then another pad for the other 2 weeks. You just don't really get great kills that way. I like to load them up and put the 2 pads in at once.
But is it gonna affect my queen when I've got a new queen?
Sometimes,
She's not gonna like it.
sometimes not.
Okay,
So-
but then it also depends on how much space, if you got space.
There's so many
away
variables.
from it.
There's so many variables, like, if so, like these hives right here. This is what I would put 2 pads in right there, is a super and a deep. So I put pads in, I'd stagger them like that. And that's how they go, like this, that's too much space for 2 pads. Like, you're not gonna get a good kill on that. So, like, that's kind of my rule of thumb. So like, you could do 2 deeps, you could probably get away with that. Like, that's your traditional method of raising bees, is 2 deeps. For me, I like this. So I will smoke some queens now and then from the Formic. So it's just, like, I did this whole yard here, and I think I lost 4 queens when I did it. But there's a lot of variables to it. It depends how hot it is. Like, I'm very picky about when I put Formic on, I want to make sure it's under 85 degrees for at least 3 days. So that first 3 to 5 days, I want it below 85 degrees. So that's learning your mite treatments, is learning which tool in the toolbox. It's not always the hammer's not always the job for, or the tool for the job.
Okay, so I put the Formic and it affected the queen. They're not gonna raise another queen on their own?
They might,
And the problem,
then you're 6 weeks.
see,
So
that's what I was
this is
saying.
BMAT.
I can buy a queen.
This is
from you
important.
For, how much is your queen?
35. We haven't raised our price.
And I got 6 weeks of honey supply versus.
Yeah, to me, it's foolish to do that. Like, if you squish a queen or roll a queen, you should
Right.
buy one to replace it. Because you're gonna pay in dividends with that, right? So especially depending on the time of year, you can't wait 5 weeks. So like, for example, you roll a queen in July or in August, that's a risky endeavor, whether that hive is gonna get strong and be good for winter. I would not chance that. So like, for me, I feel like you're wasting your bees when you don't replace that queen. Now, other people are like, I don't care. If I harvest a quart of honey, I'm good. Don't matter to me. Or I don't harvest any honey, that's fine. So like, to me, I want my bees performing and doing the best that they can do. They got to pay the bills.
That's what they wanna do too, though.
Yeah, because if they're strong, right?
They're happy.
If they're weak, you're gonna have problems. You're gonna have pest problems with wax moths, and you're gonna have beetles and all those things. You have a nice strong hive, you're not gonna have as many of those problems. You're not gonna have trouble with EFB if you have good nutrition and things like that. Usually EFB, or European foul brood, is gonna show up when times are tight, right? When you have dearths and you're not feeding your bees and they're weak, or they have pests and stuff like that, then you'll start seeing EFB outbreaks from it. So like, you want your bees always hammered down. So like, that's why you're always robbing from one and giving to the other. You want your hive strong. And it's not just to produce, but like, you'll have much healthier bees. You'll have a much healthier bee yard that way, in my opinion.
Your builder, sorry. Your builder hive, then, is it bigger than your single?
I usually use a
management?
single bee.
You do?
Yeah, sometimes I'll have I'll put a medium sometimes with nectar on top just as feed, but usually it's a deep because I want the bees packed
Yeah.
in there. That's just how I do it. I've run double deeps, I've run nukes, I've run double nukes, I've run 6-frame foams, I've run double 6-frame foams, I've done everything. Every year I fill and try, and it just depends what I got. Like my first batch of queens, I might have a very different situation than my last batch of queens where I don't care, right? So like my last one, I probably already have 20, 30, 40 queens sitting in the bank, so if they work out, they work out. So I can take some chances and experiment some things, and the trying to raise queens when there's a dearth sucks, like it's hard, really hard. So the like breeding's hard, getting them to draw cells is hard, like everything gets really complicated trying to do it when there's not good nutrition. So it's just like us, we do way better when we're happy. Right, if you're grumpy about things, it doesn't usually go well. So the same thing with the bees, so you want them in a good situation when you're doing this kind of stuff. Now, it doesn't always work that way, we still have to raise queens in July when there's a dearth, so we have to feed. We have to feed our builders, we have to feed. I'll feed the hive I'm gonna graft them, like my breeders I'm gonna feed, so I have good, well-fed. Larvae that I'm gonna graft them, I want those to be the best quality that can be.
Thank you, Don.
Alright.
Yeah, excellent.
Well, maybe guys, if you wrap up the string, put it inside and then throw it in the box, that will be helpful to me. I want them back. Agreed.
Night, everybody.
All right. Okay. Thank you.